Hi, everybody. This is Pastor Ennio Zaragoza. Just want to introduce myself to you first. I pastor a church here in Dover, Delaware, at 1235 East Division Street, and I've been pastoring for over 20 some 22 years. And my wife and I and my children, and we've been having a great time doing the Lord's work. But I want to share with you about my experience. Uh, Growing up and how I came to be where I'm at. Because every single one of us have a story, and that's I always use that as an icebreaker in many places that I go to share my testimony, and is to I like to hear people's story. Why why you are who you are, and how did you get to where you are. And a lot of times that opens doors to a good conversation where I can share what God's done in my life. And today I want to try to do the same thing, to share with you what God has done in my life, and how He can also bless your life. Uh, because from experience, I know that a lot of times we lose hope. We have a tendency to give up on things, and a lot of times, we see a dark hole in front of us, and we don't know how to get out of it. But and I'm telling you that from self experience, because that's basically what happened to me. I was born in Puerto Rico, which is a territory of the United States, and so we're part of the United States. And I came to the United States when I was about 7 years old. And of course, like most Puerto Ricans at that time, we came here. We migrated here to work in the factories. My parents came here to work in the factories, and we came to New York City, and that's where I started my life here in the mainland United States. And As a 7, 8 year old, I was very ignorant of my environment. I was not very knowledgeable of how things worked and what was going on around me. I came from the countryside, up in the mountains, very small village with very little access to the outside world. So I was very ignorant to how things function, especially in a big city like New York. So my parents migrated there first, and then they sent for myself and my uh, siblings. Well, it was 8 of us, and you can imagine uh, how difficult it was for them to be able to do life and give us a good life with their limited abilities. They had no education, didn't have no money, so they worked very hard in the factories. My father worked hard. My mother took care of us. So they were constantly in a state of survival. What do I mean by that? Well, we never had enough, and we were always trying to get a little bit more. But it was difficult for them because the system worked against them. Uh, so, but they tried as much as possible. Eventually, my father gave up. He couldn't take it, so he became an alcoholic. He started drinking a lot, and became a very bad alcoholic. And so my mother and my dad would have these terrible fights, and eventually it led to a divorce where my mother left him and took us with her, and so it was her by herself in New York City to try to make life for us the best way she could. And I say the best way she could because she couldn't do much. She only had a third-grade education. She came from the little village in Puerto Rico, and trying to survive in the big city without the support mechanism that you would need to raise 8 children by a female by yourself. It was very hard. So we as children, as we were growing up, we grew up in the late '70s, early '80s in New York City, and that was a time of a lot of turbulence, a lot of difficulty in the cities, especially in the cities. It was a time where Martin Luther King was assassinated, and a lot of the city ghettos, the majority of the people living there were Black Americans, and so they revolted against anything that was not like them. And it was very difficult because a lot of Hispanics that lived in those neighborhoods suffer. Well, we went through, and we couldn't understand why, because we didn't come from an environment where there was a lot of racism. Puerto Rico didn't have that kind of culture. Our racism was basically more had to do with your social status, if you have money or you didn't have money. So, but not here in the United States. We experienced something totally different. Racism by color, and we could understand that. I could understand why the blacks were against the whites and the whites against the blacks, and so in the neighborhood that we lived, because we couldn't afford nothing else, we lived in the ghettos of New York City. And to live in the ghettos of New York City, though, as a young teenager, a young person, you basically had to belong to a gang. There was no other way to survive. Uh, and gangs were prevalent in those days. There was a gang for everything. There was a gang for Hispanics, a gang for blacks, a gang for Chinese. There was a gang for everything. And so you join a gang uh, to belong to a group so that you can survive. So that you could survive. And so I joined a gang. I joined a gang in New York City, and my gang was called the Bucket of Bloods. And when I first joined the gang, I was about 13 years old, and mostly what we did was protect ourselves against the other gangs in other neighborhoods. And uh, so that was basically my introduction to gang. And as I got older, and the situation in New York City became worse, we took a negative turn. And I think that if you ever been in a gang, or you recognize what I'm talking about, because you start not necessarily with a evil intent. Basically, you start with a gang, and you get involved in a gang to belong to a group, to be able to identify with a group, and that's basically what I did. I I belonged to a gang because I wanted to identify with a group, and at the same time, we protected each other against other gangs. And so you can imagine how or what kind of life we lived. It was a life that you was always on the edge, always trying to protect yourself from harm. And that was the kind of life that I lived as a gang member when I was younger, in my teenage years. But as I got older, the situation got a little bit darker. Uh, as a gang, we gravitated towards drugs, gravitated towards stealing, and gravitated into assaulting people and robbing people. And so we the gang took a different culture, took a different turn from being a local gang to just protecting ourselves, where we play ball together, hang out together. Now we spread out, and now we wanted more territory, and now we wanted to sell drugs and to steal and to try to make money any way you could. And so I got introduced at an early age to prostitution, to drug dealing, to alcoholism, and robbing and stealing, and just doing all these crazy things that most gangs get involved in. And so uh, I wasn't very knowledgeable about anything else, because I became a good gang member, if that makes any sense. And we protected each other, and we did whatever we could to make money and survive in New York City. And in those days, in the late '70s, early '80s, there was a lot of problems in the city, a lot of ethnic problems, cultural problems, racial problems, and so we we got involved in all that, and it was a melting pot of so many different situations. And I'm sharing this with you because if you are in a gang right now, or you're being tempted to be in a gang, I want to hopefully touch your heart in such a way that I can help you make a better decision. And because I didn't have the mentorship, I didn't have the support mechanism to make better decisions for myself. So I made the decision that was popular with everybody else. and basically, you follow the crowd. You follow those that you feel are like you, and that's basically what I did. Uh, and my story is very long, and but I want to make it short in a way so that in the time that I have, I can impact your life with how God touched my life. Because at the age of 16, I started to go into institutions. I became delinquent, and at the age of 16, I went to juvenile detention, juvenile prison, and so and by the time I was 18, I was already a criminal, a felon, and by the age of 18, I was already in the men's prison. So from the age of 16, I began a life of imprisonment. And basically, I can say that the reason why that happened was because of the environment that I was in and the people that I was with and the decisions I made. Because you have to be responsible for the decisions you make in life. And I made some decisions that were incorrect that took me to prison as a 16-year-old. And of course, as I mentioned before, it was my mother taking care of 8 of us. Uh, we were very poor. Sometimes we didn't have food in the house to eat. I remember my mother fixing cold water with sugar, and she would give us that to be able to resolve the pain of hunger that we were going through. And you would think that that doesn't happen in the United States, but I'm a living example that that happened to us, where I would open the door or the refrigerator, and there was nothing there, and my mother would. That was her remedy, uh, water with sugar, and that kind of helped a little bit, but you still was hungry, and uh, and so I rebelled, and that took me to juvenile detention. At 16, I started to do time, and and by the time I turned 18, I was still in detention, and they came to pick me up when I turned 18. Because when you turn 18 here in the United States, you got to go to the men's prison. And during before 18, you go to juvenile prison. It's like being locked up in high school. But once you turn 18, you go to the big boys prison. And I remember, and I want to share this with you because this is impact. I remember that they came to pick me up. A police trooper came to pick me up at the juvenile detention, and uh, he put me behind his vehicle to take me to the men's prison. And that moment was crucial in my life. It impacted my life forever because when he put me back in the back of that seat, all of a sudden I looked out the front windshield of the car, and I saw a black hole going around like a circle, and it had no depth, it had no ending, and it was like trying to suck me in. And I was so fearful of what I was looking at. Now, I was never religious. We never went to church. My mother never took us to church, so we never read the Bible. So we were not religious people. But this happened to me, and it was a black circle. It was sucking me in, and I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, a fear entered into my body that I couldn't understand. I began to cry, to shake, and I began to sweat in back of that trooper's car, and I couldn't control my emotions to the point that the trooper said to me, "Son, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay." But I was still in that state of shock that I was going to a men's prison, and I was fearful of what was going to happen to me, because you hear the stories of being abused and young men being abused uh, and made to do things that they didn't want to do, and so I was thinking about all this, and then that black hole in front of me sucking me in, and as I was going through all these emotions, all of a sudden somebody sat next to me. I felt this presence sit next to me in back of the trooper's car, and I couldn't. There was no one there. I couldn't see anybody, but I felt the presence. And I share this with you because That was, I always use that as an example to share with people that God is attentive to our needs. God never forgets us. He never does. Even in the moment of desperation in your life, God is with you. He's right there next to you. Maybe all your mess and all the things in your life are blocking you from being able to feel his presence, but he's reaching out to you. And at that moment, someone sat next to me, and he said to me, Ennio, don't be afraid. And all of a sudden, the moment he said those words, Ennio, don't be afraid, everything that I was going through was lifted from me. The fear, the shaking, the state of mind of not knowing what my life was going to be like. Uh, all that was lifted from me, and I felt a state of peace. As the Bible uh, uh, explains it as the peace that surpasses all understanding. I was still going to the men's prison, but I felt that everything was going to be okay. Because the Word of God, when it impacts your life, it will change the way you think. Amen. And I know, then years later, I knew that that was the Word of God, that was Jesus speaking to me, reaching out to me. And they took me to the men's prison. And of course, if you've ever been to prison as a gang member, most gang members go to prison sometimes in their life unless they die, or they get a revelation that they need to move away from what they're doing. You know that in prison, gangs are prevalent too. There's a lot of gangs in prison, and so they took me to the prison, and I went through receiving. That's where they give you your clothes and all your soap and all the things you need to go to start making life in that prison. And so I got all my stuff. It was about 5 o'clock, and they were taking me to my cell. And I remember it was dinner time, and we had to go. I had to walk through the mess hall, and as I was walking through the mess hall, oh, by the way, when that voice said to me, Ennio, don't be afraid. He also said to me, if anybody says anything to you, jump on them. Now I know that sounds a little strange, but I'm telling I have no reason why to exaggerate my life. I don't care. I'm never going to meet you probably or see you. You take it for what it's worth to you. But that's what happened to me. And he said, jump on them. I forgot about it. I didn't think about it. I went to the prison. I had my stuff, and they were taking me to my cell. I was walking through the mess hall. It was dinner time, so the inmates were eating dinner. As I walked through the mess hall, the first table on my left, a big prisoner. Guy was, he looked like a bodybuilder. Of course, that's mostly what they do in prison is bodybuild. So this guy was a big guy, and he looked up to me as I was walking by, and he says, "Boy, you're gonna be mine tonight." And now you can imagine, I was 18, you just turned 18. I weighed about 165 pounds. I had long hair, and then you have this guy that looked like Godzilla, telling me, "Boy, you're gonna be mine tonight." So guess what happened? I remember what that voice said to me, that the first person that says something to you, jump on him. And I jumped on him. I grabbed him by the neck. I started punching him. I bit his ear. And he was so big that he just got up from his table, and I was still hanging on to him. And so the officers, the guards came real quickly, and they took me away from him. They grabbed me, they pulled me away from him, and they put me in solitary confinement for a week. So I spent the first week of my experience in prison in solitary confinement. And in solitary confinement in that prison, you have nothing. It was a cell. We had a little window, and they gave you a bed, a sheet, and a pillow, and there was a book on the table, and that was it. That was it. So after a week, they came to get me, and I left. And I took that book. I didn't know what that book was, but it just seemed important. And so I took it with me, and I'm going back to my cell. And as I'm walking to my cell, I noticed that everybody avoided me like the plague. I was walking, and they walk across the hallway. And so I get to my cell and I ask my cellie is another person that was in the cell with me. I said, hey man, why everybody's avoiding me like the plague? Like and they cross the hallway when I'm walking by. And he said, no man, it's just that everybody here thinks you're crazy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, that guy that you jumped on, the reason why they were on that table by themselves is because they're the worst inmates in this whole prison. And so, so you need to watch your back, and that's why nobody wants nothing to do with you. So that was my first experience in the men's prison. And of course, after that, nobody did nothing to me because they thought I was crazy, and they began to call me the crazy Puerto Rican. And then later on, I made friends with that guy, the Godzilla guy, and and so I began to do my time. And so in prison, like the one I was in, there was also gangs. In my prison, there was the white gang and the black gang, and so I was like in between because I was Puerto Rican. So they had their fights, and whenever they came together to fight, they would come to me and say, "Ennio, whose side are you on?" And I said, but the blacks would come to me and say, well, "Are you going to be with us? Because you're Puerto Rican, you're part of us." And then the whites would come to and say, "But you're a white Puerto Rican, so you should be with us." And to avoid the conflict, I just put myself in the hole by myself. So until they got done with their conflicts. But that's the kind of life you live in prison. So you negotiate prison. You don't get involved with no one. You stay to yourself and say very little. And if you say very little, sticks to yourself, don't take no gifts or anything from anybody, you survive. And I did. So I decided that prison was going to be my life because a year after I was in there, I got sentenced. My trial finished. The judge took me before his bench, and he said to me, "Son, I'm going to make an example out of you." And he gave me 60 years of prison. And can you imagine? I was 18 years old, going on 19, and I got 60 years of prison time. It was such a shock to me because I thought that I was going to just get time served. And that's another story of what happened. But I thought I was going to get time served, and I didn't. I got 60 years in prison. And when the judge said 60 years, my knees buckled, and I fainted in the courthouse, and they had to carry me back to my cell because I was in such a shock. And so from that moment on, I became even worse. I became very violent. I was a introvert. Not violent in the sense that I would pick fights with anybody. Violence in the sense that I wouldn't wait for you to say anything to me or do anything to me. I would do it to you first. And that's the kind of life I live. And so nobody, fortunately, because of my attitude, nobody really wanted nothing to do with me. So I decided that I was going to make prison my life. At the young age of 19, I made it a conscientious decision that prison was going to be my life. So I erased from my mind, from my emotion, I erased everything that had to do with the outside. I never got a visitor. Very rarely. My mother would come once a year to visit me. I wasn't getting no visit because I just didn't have that. I didn't have anybody to come visit me, and most of the people that I hung out with before I came to prison, they had their own problems. So I made prison my life, and at the age of 19, I remember that I was laying in my bed, and I just came down from my job, my prison job, and I was laying in my bed. And it was about 6:30 at night. I'm sorry, no, I came from dinner. I had come already from my job, and I came from dinner, and I was resting, and as I was laying there with my eyes closed, I felt somebody grab my feet from the outside, and I jumped up with a shank. I always had a shank, a homemade prison knife, and I jumped up. And when I jumped up, I saw there was this gentleman, this fella that nobody bothered. He always was by himself in the corner reading a book, and his name was Robinson, Brother Robinson. And he said, "Oh, no, relax." And he told me, "Relax, don't. I'm here just to invite you to a meeting." And I told him, I said, "I don't want to go to any meeting. I want to be just left alone. Thank you." He says, and then, but he kept insisting. He says, "No, no, no, you need to come to this meeting." I shared this with you because God is going to put people in your life that He's going to use to help you make the right decisions. Because I would have never made a decision to seek anything that had to do with God because I didn't know who God was. Well, he said, "No, no, come on, I want to invite you to a meeting." I said, "No, I don't want to go." I was very firm about it. I don't want. Then he said, "But they're going to have coffee and donuts." And I haven't had a donut in 3 years. So I said, "Well, I go, I eat my donut, drink my coffee, and come back to my cell, and that's it." Little did I know is that when you went to that meeting, you sat there and they locked the door on you, and you couldn't get out until they finished. And I didn't know what the meeting was about. Then as I was listening to them, I realized it was a Bible study because they were preaching about this guy named Jesus and about being set free and I'm saying to myself, what, it really sounded crazy, if you can believe me, because I never had religious experiences in my life. The only Jesus I knew was Jesus, and back in my cell, I didn't know anything about no Jesus. But I sat there drinking my coffee, eating my donut, and with Brother Robinson on my right hand side, and I think God chose him at that moment uh, uh, to make sure that I make a decision that day. I mean, I was like, you know, God put him in my life so that he would help me to make decisions, even if I didn't want to make them. How's that? Because God, that's the way God works sometimes. When God has a purpose in your life, I guarantee you, beloved, that He is going to do whatever He can to help you make the decision. And I believe that because today I pastor a church, a very powerful church here in Dover, Delaware, with my wife. We are very active in the community. I serve the homeless. I serve the prostitutes, the drug addicts. I'm in the streets ministering to the people. We go to the motels where the homeless are, and we minister to them. And we have a vibrant church. I would have never thought that was part of my future. But that day in that meeting, after they got done talking about all the stuff they were talking about, they made an altar call. And Brother Robinson said to me, "Boy, get up there." That's how young I looked. Everybody called me boy or son. And so he said, "Boy, get up there." And I said, "Man, I don't want to go up there. That's okay." I said, "No." And so he kept bugging me and banging me on my thigh. He said, "Boy, get up there. You need to get prayed for." And I guess he realized that I was headed into a really bad situation in my life because I had given up life. And he was part of my block, so he saw me, and we worked together in the same industry. And so he knew that God touched his heart for me because he knew that I was headed in the wrong direction real quick. And so he insisted, says, "Son, get up there and pray for her." So I got up. Basically, I'll be honest with you, sometimes you do things because you want to avoid other things. So I wanted to avoid Brother Robinson. And besides, he also had life in prison because he shot his wife and her boyfriend that he caught him in his bed when he came from work. So you can't, people with that kind of sentence, you kind of respect them a little bit because you don't want them to go off on you. So I said, what is it going to bother me? I just go up there, get prayed for, and get the heck out of here. So I did. I went up front, and the preacher that was there, that they came every week from the outside, he says to me, "Son, what would you like me to pray for you about?" And now, I was my mind was a mess. I grew up in gangs as a teenager. I didn't know life to be good. I didn't see anything good in life. I was lost beyond of what I could understand. Living the streets. So I never knew nothing about God. Didn't know anything about the Bible. And so this man is asking me, what do you want me to pray for you about? And I did not know what to say. That's how lost I was. I didn't know what to say. I didn't believe in anything. Not because I was an atheist, it's because I never learned to believe. And many of you who are gang members, I know this video is going to go to Haiti, and many of you know what I'm talking about. It's not that uh, that you're making a decision knowing that the decision you're making is your decision. It's that you really don't know any better, or you really don't have no idea what to say or what to do. You just move with the flow, move with the crowd. And that's what I did all my life. But this moment, this man asked me to make a decision. What do you want me to pray for you about? And I'm asking you the same question as he asked me. What would you like us to pray for you about? And I didn't know what to say. So the only thing that came out of my mouth was, well, pray for me about what you've been talking about. I figured since he was talking about it, it must have been important to him. So so maybe it would be something good for me. Because they seem like good people. And so he said, and these are his exact words, because his mental, if you understand how the Spirit of God works, when you understand that, you realize that the mental of one person can flow over to you. And he said, raise your hand. I raised my hand, and he says, and repeat after me. And after you get done repeating after me, I'm going to lay my hands on you, and your life is never again going to be the same. And the reason why I say that his mental can't flew over me was because those are the same words I use today to bring people to Christ, especially men. And so I did. I raised my hand. I repeated after him. And when I got done, he laid his hand on my head, and it was like a lightning bolt went through my body. I heard it, bam! It lifted me up from the floor and knocked me out. And now, you're saying, well, you probably got manipulated, and you probably saw that somewhere, and that's just your weakness. No, brother. Let me tell you something. In prison, you don't let no man touch your head, and especially touch your head and you faint, because you go back to your cell. Every person is going to try to touch your head, see if you're going to fall. And so if it's not real, you are in danger. So I fainted. I got up from that floor. I don't know how long I was fainted, but when I got up from that floor, my life was never again the same. From that moment on, God transformed me from what I was to what I am now. I didn't finish school. I was a dropout. Didn't know how to read well. I didn't know how to write well. I didn't know how to communicate well. And at that moment, my mind expanded. My desire to learn became greater. And remember that book I told you about that I took with me from solitary confinement? It was a Bible. I didn't know that. I just took it. I kept it under my pillow. And when I went back from that meeting to my cell, I took that Bible and I began to read it from cover to cover. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And I became consumed with wanting to be like Jesus Christ. That's why I'm reaching out to you, beloved. Muhammad is dead. Buddha is dead. All these other philosophers are dead. The only one that's living and can touch your life and change you forever is Jesus Christ. He touched my life, and my life was never again the same. And I might not never be able to see you, but I want to share that with you. That if you give God a chance, the same thing he did for me, he'll do it for you. And your life will never again be the same. From that moment on, I was never again the same. 1 year later, they had discipled me. I got to just share this because I know my time's running out, but I want to share this because this is important. 1 year later, I got they discipled me. They taught me the Bible, and they taught me biblical principles and the love of God. And so a year later, Brother Robinson, through a miracle of God, got released from prison because he had life without parole. He got released from prison. And a year later, they had discipled me, and he was the leader of the Christian community. In other words, in that prison, there was a chaplain, a prison chaplain, a prisoner who was a chaplain, and an outside chaplain. And he was the chaplain for the prisoners in that prison. A year later, they released him, and by then I was disciple, and I became the chaplain. That's God, beloved. Only God can do something like that. Take a person like me from nothing, miserable, drug addict, alcoholic, a loser, homeless, with a life sentence, have given up in life, and transform him and to make him to what I am now. I am married. I have children, grandchildren. I love God. Matter of fact, to close, I'm going to tell you how good God is. I was the leader also of the Hispanic community, and I began to organize the Hispanic inmates, and the governor, knowing that there was a problem with the Hispanic community, sent a social worker to work with us. And since I was the leader, the social worker had to work with me to establish programs in the prison and to help the Hispanic prison, because in those days, if you were Hispanic and didn't know English, they didn't do anything for you. They just locked you up, give you 3 meals and a cot, and that's it. And so I became the ambassador for the Hispanic community. And the governor sent a social worker, and that social worker started working with me. And today, that social worker is my wife. So, and a year later, because she was only there, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Only a year, she was there for a year because she applied to Temple Medical School, and they denied her and told her that she would have to wait a year. And during that year, she got a job with the prison system to work with the Hispanics and to work with me. We fell in love. And after that year was done, she went to medical school. And after that year, I was released from prison. So I met my wife that 1 year when I met her. After that, she left to medical school, and through a miracle too, I was released from prison, and I was released from prison on my birthday, November 11th. No, I'm sorry, November 20th. I was released from prison. So God bless me, beloved, and I'm sharing this with you because I want to impact your life. That if God did this with me, He'll do it with you. Don't give up. If you're a gang member and you're listening to me, there's a better life. And I want you to pray with me this prayer. And I believe that if you pray with me this prayer, repeat these words after me, I'm going to lay my hands over this camera, and your life is never again going to be the same. So pray with me. Father, I'm asking you to touch my life. I don't know you, but I want to know you. I'm struggling with the kind of life that I have. But just the same way that you helped Pastor Ennio, I'm believing that you're going to help me. And I'm opening my heart to you, Lord. That whatever needs to be done, that you will do it. So that I can be the man or the woman of God that you want me to be, the person you created me to be. And I declare this in Jesus' name. Father, in Jesus' name, touch their lives right now. Amen.